Welcome back, everyone. I'm so glad that everyone's here today. My name is Brenda Rigney. I'm a Dream Biz Coach, and you're tuning into the X podcast. And today I have on Sophia Para. Hi, Sophia. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm so glad to be here.
It's great to have you here. So everyone knows Sophia is a marketing coach, a content strategist, and she's actually my coach. So we'll get into that today. But I worked with Sophia over the last, I want to say 4, 5, 6 months, something like that. We started working together at the beginning of the summer.
Yeah, I was trying to think about that earlier because it's like the way we were working on something so specific, and because it's like a project, it's just like it's done when it's done. Do you know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
feel like it felt like it was a few months. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
fun.
it was great. Yeah, no, we got to know each other really well. And I loved like our weekly calls or bi-weekly calls of getting together. But I wanted to bring Sophia on here today because number one, she's an entrepreneur. And I love to go behind the scenes into what other business owners are doing out there, the highs and lows, the fears, the jubilations, all the things that we sort of go through as entrepreneurs. And so Sophia has graciously like volunteered to be like our like open the kimono, so to speak, and talk about her business today, but also give some like really, I think, valuable feedback and insight, because that's what I've learned from Sophia around the space of digital marketing and kind of what she sees business owners doing out there. But Sophia, before we kind of get into that, I'm kind of curious how you got into this business. And can you kind of give us a little bit of a backdrop to like, did you just like wake up one day at the age of 5 and say, I want to be a content strategist, mom?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. And it's absolutely not. No,
Okay.
I was gung ho on being an actress. I was like, it wasn't just any actress. I was going to be an Oscar award winning actress. I was certain of it. It was my calling. And like, I mean, I'm not even kidding. I have so many at home videos that my mom filmed of me like making up scenes and like doing my like award winning shows and then making an award for her to give me. And then me doing like an acceptance speech. Like I was a psycho child who was certain she was going to be winning an Oscar one day.
That's
And
awesome.
I did actually go to acting school, and I lived in New York City. I was on TV. I did do all of that. And it was actually on an American TV show called Blue Bloods, where I learned about Instagram.
Okay.
And yeah, someone had mentioned this like private photo album app, right? And I was like, oh, cool, private photo album. I love taking photos. So I was testing it, and the only photo I had on my phone, this was back, now I have like 40,000 photos on my phone. But back in the day, I didn't take as many photos. The only photo I had on my phone was my husband, or at the time my boyfriend.
Mhm.
He was cheering on the Knicks, so he was wearing a Knicks jersey and underwear. That was it, and I put that on my Instagram, and I
I'm sure
didn't.
he'd love that.
That's when I realized it was actually a public platform.
Yeah.
But it like awakened something in me because I got so much response from it, and I was like, okay, first of all, this is not private, but also there is power here. Like, look at this connection. Like, look at what's possible here. So fast forward many years of using it for my acting career,
Mhm.
but then getting more excited about the promotional stuff that I was doing instead of actually acting. So I stopped trying to act. I started to becoming a social media manager, and one thing led to the next over the past, I don't know, decade or so. And yeah, and here I am today. But it all started on the set of Blue Bloods.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I was kind of the same way. I was working in video gaming, and it wasn't with Instagram, it was with LinkedIn. And that was sort of my first social channel.
Yeah,
I think Facebook came out obviously before that, but I wasn't really on Facebook. I think I had it just because everybody else had it, but I wasn't really doing
same.
anything there. And then LinkedIn was my sort of like deep dive into social media and like recognizing the power of like connections and how you could use this for business and all these other things. And then eventually I got onto Instagram. But yeah, you kind of fall into it. But it's kind of cool how like you also fell into your career like this way, the career that you're doing now, through another career avenue just by going on Instagram and posting that picture.
Yeah, honestly, when I look back at how it all happened, it's really crazy because I'm not even kidding. Like I wasn't dabbling in acting. Do you know what I mean? I was very serious about it. And even though, they say you really need to stick with it for 10 years before you're going to see any traction. I mean, it's entrepreneurship and being an actor are two quite similar things in that there's a ton of rejection, there's a ton of years of feeling like nothing's going to happen, like
Right.
failing. It's very similar in that sense. So in a lot of ways I almost feel like the acting career prepared me for entrepreneurship, but for some reason entrepreneurship felt like something I wanted to stick to, whereas the acting industry I decided quite quickly. I think 4 years in I was like, this isn't, I can't even believe I'm saying this, mom, but I'm not going to be an actor. Like, I have no interest. Like, and she had no idea what the heck I was going to do. And neither did I. I was like, I don't know, something in social media. Like, there's something here. And now I work, social media is part of the work I do, but I do so much more now. Not, it's
Yeah.
not just social, but you're right. It was Instagram and then just taking the steps from there and burning out and really seeing how Instagram affected me as a human to realize, okay, I want to learn all these other things too and understand how to amplify Instagram and how Instagram can amplify other things. So now how I really think about what I do is like I really help people look at the bigger picture and see how everything's working together. I feel like that's the best way I know how to describe like where I ended up, but
Yeah.
it all started on Instagram.
Well, I think I mean, ultimately, when I think about a lot of entrepreneurial journeys, like we go after a passion and then
Mm-hmm.
somehow that drives like, more purpose, more intention. And then I think I love the example of how you like then you took that zoomed out look of your business, but also just the world of marketing or digital marketing or social media and said, okay, it's not just this little tiny nugget here, like posting pictures every single day, but it's actually like, taking it back a little bit further and like building out a strategy, building out a game plan, seeing how you can make like transformations in your business. So looking back now on your business that you
Mm-hmm.
started as this like marketing coach and content strategist, what would you say do differently if you were starting up today, like day one?
Well, one thing I really messed up on is I didn't focus on my email list very quickly.
Okay.
So I really focused on the social media side of things, and I didn't talk about. I mean, I had the email list there, but I wasn't promoting it. I wasn't thinking about how many subscribers I had on my email list. I was thinking about how many followers I had.
Okay.
And there was a point when, I mean, because again, we're looking back like many years ago when Instagram was just beginning, right? Where growing a following was a lot easier. And so I feel like it almost made sense because it's like people would get excited about your content and then you could take them very easily over to your email list, right? Today, those both of those things can be very difficult. People second guess get handing over their email address because they don't want spam.
Yeah.
People also don't follow everyone because the algorithms are just work a lot differently. And so we're not everyone's seeing everyone's content anyway. You know what I mean? So but I think that if could do anything differently, I would go back in time. I would continue with my passion for social, but I would add the email and I would be simultaneously growing both of them. The people that did that right away are so much further ahead in business. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, like the
So,
Amy
yeah,
Porterfield, those type of, Jenna Kush.
Amy Porterfield, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Ellen Yin's another one. I was just talking to her, like, they that was like one of the first things they focused on. And they have, I mean, like hundreds of thousands of people on their email list. And I'm not exaggerating. And
Right.
like, it helps. It helps.
Yeah. I mean, to all my email subscribers that might be listening to this podcast, I have like kind of a love-hate relationship sometimes with my email list because I think you're right in the sense of social media. It's like the followers, it's you get into that dopamine rush of like they like my content, I got so many views. And sometimes the email list can be like a little bit like tumbleweeds. Like, is anybody out there? Is anyone reading this? Like, sure, you can see the analytics, but it's like, okay, did they read it? Did they like read it all? Why didn't they click on things? Like you
Yeah.
start getting into a bit of a headspace around it. But I think it's just a different science, right? It's just, you just have to learn it,
Yeah.
understand it, figure it out more. Like what like as you've like maybe now invested more in email, what's one of the big things that you've seen behind that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, this actually came up recently on a like a private coaching, like I was like in a group. And so there was like like 10 people on this call and they were asking me their burning questions. And one person asked this question. I was like, didn't realize this is my opinion on this, but this is my opinion on it. So this is what I'll say. She was curious with email. She feels like, she's curious like how to use each one. She's like on social, I feel like I want to be social, and then on email, I feel like I want to be educational.
Mm.
But I don't know if that's true. Like how do I separate like how I show up? And I was like, I paused on this and I was like, I kind of feel like you should be social in both
Both,
places.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
and educational on both, and
And
like
both exactly. And I think
yeah,
that that's something, if there is something people make mistakes about, is that they're not doing that. Like they teach a lot on their email and then they're doing relatable social things on their social, but
right,
there's room for all of those things in both places. So for me, one thing that I didn't do when I started that I'm so glad I do now is my email works on a 6 week cycle. So
Okay.
it's like I know every 6 weeks that I have certain types of emails that I want to go out. So my sixth email in my cycle is always a sales email, and that's to keep me accountable because I'm one of those people that will just give, 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 and I'll
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
forget to sell.
yeah,
And I feel like a lot of people I work with are like
yeah.
that.
Well, we're just really
Um,
passionate about what we do. So it's just like,
exactly.
here's the whole enchilada. Oh, right. I was
Yeah.
supposed to ask you for something.
A
Yeah.
100%. It's like, oh yeah, I have to keep my business open.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I should probably sell something. So my sixth email in that cycle, it's to hold me accountable and to make sure that I remember to sell at least every sixth email, right? So that's my sixth email. But then in between there, right, I have an email that's designed for engagement, right? So sometimes that's like a prompt for a Q&A. So I'll like invite people to ask me a question that day. So I get people to say something. Sometimes it's like, okay, a very short email where it's like, hey, like, okay, I just did this. So I'll just repeat the email I just said. I posted an Instagram story, sorry, an Instagram reel about defining what nurturing is. And I have a
Mm.
different definition than a lot of people. So I defined what that is. And so I wrote in my email, I was like, if you think nurturing is just about posting every day on social media, you need to watch this video. Here's the link. Let me know what you think, Sophia. That was it, right? And the whole strategy behind that was to get link clicks because everyone who clicked on that link was going to get a follow-up email like the following day saying, "Hey, I saw that you watched this video. I'm so glad you did. What are
Oh,
your questions?"
I
Right?
love that.
Like, are you
Yeah.
doing this differently? So again, the objective of that email is to create a conversation. So that's going to go out within my 6 week cycle. And then I have some education sprinkled in there. And then I have
Mhm.
a case study sprinkled in there. Like I'm just trying to think in 6 weeks, like what is something, is someone who's like going to get excited to buy from me on that sixth email, what are the things they need to see? But
Yeah.
they would never know. Like they would have to study me so hard to really see what I was doing. But for me, I know I'm being social, I'm being educational, I'm talking about my clients, I'm selling, I'm doing all the things that I would prioritize on social media. I'm just also doing it on my email. So
Yeah,
that's
and
something
you
that
have
really
the
helps.
you also have the luxury of going in a little bit deeper, but I love the tip that you gave. Like I'm gonna go back and listen to this podcast again when I'm done, just because I'm like I can't take notes while I'm also talking to you. But just the idea of like, I gave this tip out, go check the link on my Instagram. Everyone that clicked on that link, I'm now gonna follow up with another email message the next day saying, "Hey, saw that you did this, and I want to give you a little
Yes.
bit more." That is brilliant because I like
Yeah.
links out all the time, but sure, do I follow up on everybody that's clicking those links? Probably not. So I think that you're right in the sense of having that 6 week out strategy. So you can go, okay, people click on the link, I'll hang up this backup email. Like you mastermind that whole strategy, which
A
is awesome.
100%. And I'll even add one thing to that because that particular video, it just so happens that if they were to click on that link and watch that video on social media, there's also a very clear call to action on social media. So if they respond to that, or if they respond to my email, or if they respond to both, either way, there's like 3 or 4 opportunities with different calls to action for them to say something to me because my whole thing is creating conversations with people, right? So it's like if that's not going to get you, I mean, and I don't mean that in like haha, gotcha, but if
Yeah.
that's not going to like compel you
Right.
to learn more or get more information or give me the opportunity to serve you deeper, and I'm not even talking about paid, I'm just saying like let me help you, you know what I mean?
Mm.
There's multiple ways for them to say, "Yes, I need help with this," so that they can raise their hand and I can actually see them and know that they're there. So that they're not just a number on Instagram insights, which who I don't even know who that number is. I just see, oh, my insights are telling me this got
Yeah.
77 views or whatever. You know
Right.
what I
Yeah.
mean? It just gives you more information.
Yeah, no, I love it. And you mentioned earlier, and this is one of the things that like drew me into your web was because so many people are talking about how to get more leads or how to like, ace your sales calls and get those conversions. But there's this sweet spot in the middle that really, like when we talk about like, being a business owner that we need to invest our time on is that nurturing of customers.
Yes.
Not everyone is going to buy from you by Friday, 5 o'clock. Like you see on Instagram, oh, I'm a 6 figure business owner, I'm a 7 figure. Yeah, but like they had to spend time nurturing those relationships. We talked about like the Jenna Kuchers or the Amy Portersfields that have like these mass email lists and they've just been nurturing people over time. So whenever they launch something, it's just like instant success. But there's been like a time bubble in there. And
Yep.
one of the things that I think you're known for, or at least like when I see you pop up and like what I think of like what Sophia is all about is that nurturing piece. So can we talk a little bit about that? Like, I mean, how did you figure that out first of all? Like,
Yeah.
did you, like, when, again, going back in time, actress turned into content strategist. Oh, I need to be nurturing people. Like, did it happen that instantly? Or you were like, no, there's something missing in my business. And like, how did that evolve?
Hmm.
And like to now it's actually like a cornerstone of what you do.
Yeah, I think this went back to my husband's stroke, actually. I think that was really when there was a light bulb. And so let me first define it the way I define it so that to give people context. So, like traditionally speaking, if you were to go on social or see someone else talking about nurturing, what you often hear is post every day on social media. Or, it's not even every day, post
Right. That's it.
consistently on social media, email consistently. Like if you show up often enough in front of the people who have decided to follow you or subscribe to you in some capacity, eventually they will become nurtured. And if they are nurtured, eventually they will say yes. And hey, that is true, right? They can stick around long enough and eventually be converted into a buyer.
Yeah, you've beaten them down long enough. It's like, fine,
Yes.
another message from you. I will buy your offer.
Exactly. And it's like I'm not like because a lot of people, they're like, "Oh, but this does happen. This does." And I'm like, I'm not saying it doesn't, right? It's just that it could take years.
Yeah.
Like, and this is why to your point, like the Jenna Kutchers and them, right? They have such massive email lists. So they're basically on like phases, right? Whenever there's let's say 7,000 people not ready to buy from them, there's 2,000 that are because they're now in the year 4 and it's time. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So they just like they've just reached that point. Now, that's great for them. I love it for them. And also for most of us, we don't have those kinds of email lists and we don't really want to wait 4 years to make a sale, you know?
Yeah.
So for me, nurturing is specifically about conversation. If something you are doing inside of your marketing is not generating conversation, it needs to be evaluated, right? Something needs to happen for it to actually be called nurturing because if it's not expediting the relationship, right? It
Mhm.
can't be nurturing. That's how I define it.
Okay.
So I realized this, I first of all, it was COVID. Was it COVID? No, my husband had a stroke the year before COVID. And first of all, it was awful. He lost
Yeah.
his short-term memory. He knew who I was, he knew who everyone was, but he was just like on a loop. Do you know what I mean? He kept forgetting things. He didn't know what stories he was telling us. And it was lasted like 6 to 8 months, let's say.
Wow.
And I, of course, in that time period, I mean, my business at that point was paying like had been like our main source of income for a while. But
Hmm.
then when my husband had a stroke, he was unable to work at all. So it became official. Like I had to focus on this business. And yet I was working 21 hours a day. I was so burnt out. I truly feel like I was like on the verge of death. Like I was just so exhausted.
And
So
you're also caregiving for your husband at the time.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then comes COVID, and my dad, who had been fighting cancer for a few years, he relapsed. And so he ended up starting to kind of transition. He was dying, right? And my husband got a little bit better, but he was having a lot of side effects. Like his memory came back, but he was just throwing up all day randomly, just like we couldn't explain why. By the way, we never figured out an explanation for that, but he was throwing up constantly. We were in and out of the emergency room. And I had moved in with my dad because my dad was literally dying.
My
And he
gosh.
had this awful, I promise I will get to the point, but I have to
No, no.
paint this picture.
This is
He
behind the scenes,
had,
folks. Like this is like this,
yeah,
this is the
because
real stuff that happened.
exactly. This is like life was lifing,
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that, whether it looks like this or not. It's like they get to a point of like, oh my God, something has to fucking change.
Yeah.
And that was where I got because my dad's cancer, not only was it awful because he was dying, but he had a specific kind of tumor in his jaw that was actually eating his face. So when he died, he actually had like let's say a third of his face missing.
Oh my
And
God.
it was absolutely devastating. All of that to say, just to adequately paint this picture, I did not give a fuck about what I was posting on social media. You know what I mean? Like all these
Yeah.
rules, you got to post. I think at that time they were saying you got to post at least twice a day. You
Yeah,
got to, and
exactly.
I was just like, who the fuck cares? Like everything seems so stupid. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? I literally was like, this is the stupidest thing
Yeah.
ever. So I was like, okay, I just really had to get back to like the foundation of what was actually working inside of my business. And I realized the people that were actually buying from me, and I was making sales. So I knew I was doing something, and I just had to stop focusing on the social media. I had to start really figuring out what was actually working. And it was the people that were saying yes to me were people that I had communicated with before.
Mhm.
Whether they had asked me a question, I had answered it, whether we had DM'd back and forth, because I wasn't using Voxer at the time, whether they had been on a sales call a year ago, right? I just noticed every single person had communicated with me in some way. And
Right.
those are the people that were quick, easy yeses without any content, without all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So then I was like, what if instead of posting to be like, okay, I need to post a certain number of times a day. I need to use all these hashtags. Like, what if I just got rid of all those rules and all I did was post to create conversation? It was a total experiment. So all I did was like I DM'd people, I started conversations. When people followed me, I was like, "Hi, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. What are you struggling with?" And I gave them advice instead, or I shared past content that I had shared instead of create new content.
Which
So
then gets your
everything
views up and likes up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So my experiment was no new content, but daily conversation. So I had to check in 15 minutes every single day and create, let's say, 5 to 8 conversations. That was the only thing I did.
Yeah.
And I made 40 sales, and this was to my membership, 40 sales within, I think it was like 5 weeks or something like that. And again, this is me barely working because I had a lot of other shit to do. So
Yeah.
I was like, this is it, right? This is the key. And we need to be focusing more on nurturing and like real nurturing, not passive. Let's let the algorithm help us nurture. Let's actually put systems in place
Mhm.
that actually create conversation so that nurturing can be measured. And that's the thing that I don't think people were doing. They weren't measuring their nurturing.
Yeah. And so yeah, like what I'm pulling out from it also is while shit is hitting the fan in your personal life, you
Yeah.
could at least go back and look at the analytics of your business. And like, and really like measure the true analytics that were important to you. Like, yes, like we talked about earlier, the likes, the followers, those are all great from a dopamine rush, but they're not
Yeah.
necessarily money in your bank account. What puts money in your bank account? Oh, when Sally and I got into a conversation, then she bought my offer. That's getting
Hmm.
money into my bank account. I should do more of that. So going
Yeah.
back and at least reflecting on like where those successes are, because I think sometimes I see business owners get into the loop, and I've been there myself. And you mentioned that you got there too. When stuff is happening, we just want to like fix like the top layer. But if you just went down like another layer, you would actually see there's like a lot of cool stuff that's happening here that maybe you're missing on, right? And again, get out of the dopamine rush, get into, okay, this is going to take a little bit more time. But when I look at the analytics, I'm going to actually see some really good data here that's going to direct
Yeah.
me on my next strategy. And now this is like turned into not only a strategy that you have for your business, but now you monetize this like in your business for other people.
Yeah, and I feel like I've also figured out ways to create conversations. Like before, all I had was I'm gonna DM them. I'm gonna welcome them into my page. Like that was the only thing I knew to do, which worked, right? And now I do so many other, I've come up with so many different ways for people to raise their hand and say, I'm watching, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really the thing for me. It's like, how often are you inviting people to raise their hand and say, hi, I'm listening. Like, I want to do this next step. And sometimes this next step is like I said, asking a question, clicking on a link. Like it doesn't have to be
Doing a
like
poll. Yeah.
yeah, they don't even have to know that they're being watched. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just that I'm creating the opportunity, but then I'm always going back to see who is taking me up because now I can actually see who they are. Like, for example, everyone who clicked on that link I shared earlier, the nurturing link, they obviously got an automatic email, but they also got added to one of my spreadsheets so that the next time I launch something related to that, I'm going to shoot them all a message, say, hey, I remember you like post
Good
on that
one.
link, you watch
Yeah.
that video, like, and you maybe they asked me a question. I wanted to circle back because I'm actually teaching a class on this, or I'm going to teach 6 strategies. I'm making this up at the moment, but like that's totally something I would do. And now I have a list of people that are already ready for that information because they told me, and I can invite them into it. So those are all
Yeah,
conversations,
I
you
love that.
know?
And then you just mentioned like, putting in 15 minutes a day. Like I talk about this all the time, like, because people will ask me, like, how much time do you spend on sales and marketing, Brenda? And I'm like, well, I do an hour of sales a day and an hour of marketing. Marketing to
Mhm.
me is generating new content. So it could be my email, could be a podcast like we're doing right now. This is an hour, done, check.
Yeah.
Or sales would be getting in the DMs, talking to people, all the people that answered my poll or my little slider, widget on Instagram on the weekend. That's what I did. So I did a bunch of polls
Yes.
out yesterday and Q&A stuff. After I get off this podcast with you, I'm getting my hair cut. And I'm gonna sit there in the chair while I'm under like the heat thing, getting my hair colored and stuff like that. I'm gonna be like responding to everybody,
Yep.
like saying, thanks a lot for doing this poll. Let me ask you, get more intel from them, send them some resources, a podcast, a link to something. So finding that time, it's there. You just need to think about like how you're using that time wisely. And I love the whole nurturing conversation. You're gonna say something. I could see you about.
Yeah, the one thing I was gonna say is like I feel I might be like what I hear people often at this point say, "Oh, but like I don't have time for that because I'm creating all this content and I can't do both and da da da." And there's so many things I have to say to that, and I'll say a couple of them, right? The first one is like you should be spending more time on engagement and conversation than you are on creating content. So if you find yourself spending 3 hours on a post or perfecting a carousel, you're overdoing the content. You
Yeah.
need to flip that around, right? Spend less time on the content and more time on the actual conversation piece. I'm not saying you should do 3 hours on any of it, right? But that's completely out of bounds. Like you shouldn't, that's not the way we should do it, right? So that's one thing. How I have done that is I repurpose a lot more often. I stop trying to get it all fucking perfect. Like
Yeah.
if the carousel is taking me longer, I'm not even kidding. Like when I'm creating something from scratch, which doesn't happen often anymore because I repurpose a lot. But when I create something from scratch, I'm only allowed to spend 30 minutes on it. I put a timer on. I
Perfect.
have carousel templates. I do very imperfect reels. My hair is not clean. I'm not wearing makeup. I don't give a flying fuck. That shit does not make me money, right? So 30 minutes is it. And when my alarm goes off, it's going up. I don't care if it's not done, it is still going up. That is why you will
Right.
see a lot of really shitty reels from me because it's, uh-oh, like I took too long. That's okay. That has trained me to work faster and smarter instead of just trying to get it so perfect, right?
Yes.
So that's one thing. And then the second thing I'll say is this can go in phases, right? Like I said, when I was really exhausted, my husband had the stroke and my dad was dying of cancer and the tumor was eating his face. And I was in a place where I just didn't have a ton of capacity. All I had was 15 minutes a day, and I chose to spend that on conversation. I didn't post barely anything during that time, right? That is all I had. Now I have more time now. My husband's doing really well. My father has passed away and things are a little bit different now. I now, you'll notice, create content again. Like I'm back doing both of the things. So let there be phases. Like I would never say only do conversations, don't post content, but if you're in a place of like a really bad place and you need to like look at your calendar and say I'm going to give myself I'm going to stop with the content for 2 weeks because I physically cannot do it. I'm going to do this instead, but then I'm going to come back. Now
Yeah.
you've got a plan, right? So you're going to feel less guilty about taking the break because there's an actual plan in place. You'll come back and you'll come back stronger. So my point is like, listen to your capacity when you need to and
Mhm.
understand that you can chop and change. Like I have seasons where I spend more time on content because that's the season. And I mean, most seasons I spend more time on conversation, but I am allowed to make the strategic decision on what is needed for me at that point. So I just want to give everyone permission to like look at
Oh,
their situation and give
yeah.
themselves permission.
I think like just underline, echo this message over and over again, because I think we do definitely get caught in this loop of like our business, like we need to be in our business 24/7
Yeah.
because I mean, it's just like, I mean, I don't know, like you could see cartoons 24/7. Don't you remember as a kid, like we only had like cartoons Saturday morning from like, well,
Yes.
maybe that's just maybe that my mom was like religious about it and like only relegated me to like, a couple hours on Saturday morning.
My mom was like that too.
But
So
they
many
also,
rules.
but they weren't also 24/7. Now there's like
Yeah.
cartoon channels that are 24/7 and kids can be watching cartoons literally all day, all night,
Yeah.
or be on YouTube. So I think we get into the same habit as business owners. Like, yes, Instagram is populating messages all the time or content all the time. That doesn't necessarily mean we need to be doing it too, but we get into this racket. So I love that where it's like, yeah, if you need to take 2 weeks off, like someone in my community was asking that the other day. It's like, oh, I want to take a couple weeks off, over the holidays. I just want to spend it with my family. I want to be present. I'm like, go
Yeah.
for it. But should
Yeah.
I make an announcement to my community that I'm going to do that? I'm like, well, you can if you want. I see people doing all the time, like, oh, I'm going on a
Yeah.
social media, like, hiatus. But it's okay. Like I honestly, like people probably won't even notice. And not that it's like they don't notice you're missing. It's just that they have
Yeah.
also other stuff going on in their life. And then when you do come back, like you said, it's going to be fresh. You're going to be like more in tune to like what you want to communicate. People are going to be like more jazzed about that versus announcing, oh, I'm taking this big hiatus. Like
Yes.
most people are
A
anyways.
hundred percent.
So it's
Yeah.
totally fine.
Yeah.
But I also love the cue up about repurposing content. Okay, I've got a couple other questions I want to ask you because I know we're getting close to time here, but I love talking to you. So I just want to get in there. Um, okay, one of the examples, because you talked about nurturing, like obviously going in the DMs, those type of things. You talk a lot about collaborations too. Like where should we be spending our time as entrepreneurs? Like collaborations compound. You get on when you start building relationships, you get on podcasts, you can co-host in people's masterminds, things like that. But one of the things that you and I worked on over the summer, because shared with everybody earlier that we worked together, was around creating a signature talk. How does having a signature talk help you out with this nurturing piece?
Yes. Okay. So a signature talk, first of all, going back to like this period of my business, actually, when I barely had any time and things like that.
Mhm.
That was, there was a point even before that. So even before my husband had the stroke, right, where I was just trying to build my business. I had zero following. Actually, at this point, I might have had a following, but the algorithms were like things were changing on Instagram where it was starting to get harder to be seen. Do you know how like there was like a shift? Like there was one day where it was like you post something and it's going to get like 1,000 likes, like no problem. And then
Right.
suddenly it was almost like overnight, people that were getting lots of engagement were just not getting a ton of engagement.
Mhm.
And so people were starting to get really stressed out. And this is when I started to wake up to the fact that, fuck, should have started my email list or at least taken it seriously. Like I said, I think I had a lead magnet, but like I never talked about it. I didn't know. I don't think I ever emailed my list either. So I realized, okay, I need to start getting in front of people. Now, granted, I think I mentioned that I was working 21 hours a day. Like
Yeah. When are you going to
I
fit that
was,
in?
I know, I was like, okay, how is this going to happen? I didn't have money for ads. Like my business did well, but I was using every dollar in my life. You know what I mean? So was growing my team. So I was either paying team members or paying my own bills because my business was supporting my family.
Mhm.
And so I just like didn't want to spend that money on ads. Like I had one of the coaches I was working with was spending a fortune on ads. And I was like, I did not have the money she was spending. And I don't know if I needed to spend that much, but that was the decision I realized. So the only thing I could think of was, and this wasn't hot at the time. Like now this is hot, but at that time this wasn't hot. I was like, the only thing I could think of is physically putting myself in front of other communities. And I was like, I need something to say, right? I need something that I can recycle. I need something that speaks to who I am and what I do and give people a taste of what I do. And I need something that people are going to want to like learn more about, like ask more questions about, or like work on and then still be in touch with me about, right? So I didn't know this, I was creating a signature talk, but that's what I ended up creating, right? I created a talk. It was a very specific topic. So it was called Hack the Algorithm because at that point,
Yeah.
everyone was struggling with the algorithm and I had really like understood it, right? And so it was called Hack the Algorithm. And I just like started reaching out to people that had bigger audiences than I did. And I said, hey, I have this really great information. Like I've studied the algorithm for years. I also have a lot of experience with bots, right? Because at the time, bots had just turned slimy. There was a point when bots were actually really incredible tools, but
Yeah.
they like ended up
Now
becoming
they're
slimy because
terrible. Yeah.
yeah, the bad people started using them. That always happens. But because of my experience with bots, like I knew so much about the algorithm. So I was like, I can share this for free for your community. And I literally just started asking people, can I go into your community like 2 a month? And I slowly started to build my email list, right? And I started to grow, my
That.
email list grew, my clients grew, and it was just like a slow and steady thing. For 2 years, I used that exact same talk, right? That no new content. Like I said, my husband had a stroke at that point. My dad was dying. So that was all I could really do to like, build up myself up to that point. You know what I mean? But I built the list. I built people that were excited about me. Everyone came in so much warmer than if they was coming from an ad or just adding themselves to a lead magnet that I had promoted.
Right.
So that's where it clicked, right? Ever since then, I always have a talk that speaks to the core of what I want to be known for, right? And now I actually have multiple talks, right? But my signature talk speaks to my signature method. Like for me, like what I feel like like I want to be known for, right? So that is what I inside of that content, I pitch it to other communities and I grow, but then I also use that exact same content on podcasts like this one, right? So
Yeah.
much of what I talk about in Signature Talk, we just talked about. You know what I mean? In my own content, I mean, content becomes so much easier to write once you have a Signature Talk as well, because you get really clear about like what you know and what you
Yeah.
want to be known in the little details, right?
Well,
So
and the other thing I find too, and so thank you very much for defining it, and letting people know how you got to it. But I think the other thing that I've seen from it since you've helped me work on my
mhm,
signature talk, and now I'm actually running with it. But even as we were like creating it, I was using that content, like because you had like
yeah,
built, you helped me build out this whole script and everything, and so I was just taking it. I was like no word of a lie. And because some people are like, oh, I don't want to tell people I'm using AI tools, but I would just take it and drop it into perplexity.ai, say, can you
yeah,
generate 10 Instagram posts for me from my signature talk? Boom. And then
absolutely.
like talk about repurposing content. I have these 10 posts that talk about my no call sales method. And I just repeat that all the time. Like every single reel that goes out now is all about my no call sales method. And I'm just using those 10 Instagram posts that I took from my signature talk. Every month or so, I put it back through Perplexity and say, okay, these are some other things that I've learned about, I want to talk about, or here's some participant feedback from my talk that worked really well for them, or feedback from my community about it. And I'll add that into Perplexity. And they're like, oh, yeah, here's another like 10 or 20 Instagram posts for you.
Yeah.
It just has become so much easier getting my messaging out there. And now people are actually seeking me out, going, hey, I've heard that you don't like doing discovery calls. I don't either.
Yeah.
How do you still sell in your business without doing a discovery call? I'm like, come into my, my signature talk.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It literally becomes almost like a gateway to
Yeah.
so many other things. And it gives you a lot of clarity as well. And I also think like when someone does a signature talk well, right? They're focusing on a lot of different angles of that topic. So they're focusing on obviously the education piece or the thing that they're actually want people to walk away with, but they're also focusing on like the relatable stuff that's underneath, like the reason people want this, the things that they hate, the reason this is going to be such a game changer. Like for you,
Yeah.
we people didn't want to get on Discovery Call. They fucking hated it, right? So we really got clear on who that person was and what they were struggling with, and we
Right.
incorporated that into the talk. So even that gives us ideas on like the relatable reels that we end up putting out, like the things that when things are trending, we want to do something like that we're going to poke fun of, or that we're going to like tell our like a, our origin story about that relates to where they are now. Like it gives you a lot of
Yeah.
clarity on those pieces too.
Well, even some of the reels that I'm doing now, it's like, okay, I get to go climb the Alps in Switzerland for the day instead of being on a discovery call. And I'm still
Yes.
making money in my business while I'm climbing the Alps for the day.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
like opened up conversations to people. It's like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, how many hours are you talking to strangers on the internet? And like, I'm not knocking
Exactly.
people that do sales calls. Like, if you do sales calls and you're successful, like, don't change your business. Go for it. Awesome. Like I was just tired of doing sales calls. I wanted to be out,
Yeah.
like walking my dog. I wanted to be out doing things with my friends and my family. I didn't necessarily want to be talking to a stranger on the internet for an hour, trying to convince them to buy something from me when they had never actually heard of me before. They were just
Yeah.
like referred to me by a friend or a family. And it's like, oh my God, I have to like rebrand myself in front of this person. It was a time suck for me, and it didn't always result in sales. So, and I saw my clients struggling with this as well. But here's the question, and then I know we're gonna get like down to like saying goodbye. But for all those people out there, they're like, but Brenda, or Sophia, I do like way more than just my signature talk. Like I am
Mhm.
like all these things. What do you say to people about that? Because now you're telling me to narrow down into like kind of one thing. Like you can have multiple signature talks, folks,
Yeah.
but like we're just talking about one thing today. What do you say to those people out there who are like, I'm all these things, and you just want me to narrow my focus down to one thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, like there's room for you to be all those other things if you want to be all those other things. But when you're working on being known for something, like you really should pick the thing and then layer out from there, but not until you pick the thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like for me, I like I said, I started with Hack the Algorithm talk, and that was the only talk I had for 2 years. I probably have like 7 talks now, right?
Mhm.
Over the years, and now people come to me for depending, some people come to me for list growth related things, some people come to me for nurture related things. Like they know me in a lot of different capacities now, so they might come to me for different reasons, right? So I have talks for those different communities, but they're all complement, and they all, like if you actually paid attention to them, they all drive back to my signature method, right? My signature method is like the heartbeat of all those things.
Yeah.
And I really understand how they all relate back to my signature method. So no matter what, I actually find it hilarious. Like, no matter what, I will get on a call, I will get on a podcast episode, I will write a post. It will always come back to my core beliefs, which are outlined inside of my signature method. Because even though I can speak on all these different topics, like I know what I'm about. I know what my business is about. I know who it helps. And that's because I got specific. And I
Yeah.
have to say, when I got specific and clear, that's when I actually got known. Right?
Yeah.
Like even Brenda,
Yeah, I
what you
love it.
said earlier today, you were like the thing that I know you for,
Mhm.
right? Like I hear that all the time, right? When I first started trying to do everything and I didn't want to pick a niche. I didn't want to do any of those things. Like, and again, I'm not saying like people do all kinds of shit that I wouldn't do and they're fine. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm all about you finding your way. However, let me tell you, it is a lot easier to pick the thing you're going to be known for than actually be known for the damn thing
Yeah.
and then branch out from there. Like that's how you create a reputation.
Well, and the reality is that, you sign on the client to work with you for that one thing. Now you've got that client kind of for life in the sense of like, yes, you're multifaceted. So now they're in your orbit. You can sell them
Yes.
on other things. It's called an ascension model.
Yep.
When they're ready for that next thing, oh, I've got the tool for you. I've got the program for you. If I give you everything all at once, anyways, it's just fire hosing. Like they just can't absorb
Yeah.
it anyways. And then they walk away going, yeah, I paid 5,000, 10, whatever it was. And I don't think I learned anything because there's just too much.
Yep.
So, do it also right timing, right place for your client too. So I think that's also really important.
Yeah, actually, I will say that. I feel like the best way to know what your talk is, like what your first topic is like to think about the first step your client is going to take, right? Because you're so right. The people that invest in my like it's not even I don't know if it's right to call it an entry level, but it's definitely like for me what I would call my signature offer. It's like the thing that I drive the most traffic to, I talk about the
Mhm.
most, right? Doesn't mean I'm not selling lots of other things, right? Like it just means like when people really hear about that and learn about that, like, and they're inside of my orbit, now they can graduate to other things, right? But when I create my signature talk, it's really going to be like where I'm going to be pointing people to is probably towards that initial offer, right? So think about the first step your client tends to need to make, right? And focus in on there and understand like what like the topics that make sense for that moment in time, right? What method you have. Like for me, I think about it like the holes they need to fill in order to create the result that they're craving more than anything.
Yeah.
When you can really think about that, like what's the result that they want, or what are the holes they need to fill in order to get that result, that's your signature talk.
Love it. Love it. So, based on everything that we've talked about today, we've talked about a lot. And I'm so grateful for the time that you've given to me and to my audience listening to this podcast, and obviously your audience and everyone else that can consume it. Because we talked about it before we started recording, like you love to give away things. So is there something that you would love to give the audience after our conversation today that you think would be so like a good starting place? Like they hear you and
Yes.
then go here next.
Yeah, okay. And might surprise some people, but I think a great step for people, actually, I'm seeing this as something a must do in 2025, right? And even though my must do in 2025 is actually to create a signature talk, but like let's put that to the side. There's something else I feel like everyone else should also be doing. And that is really understanding like the holes, speaking of holes, that they have inside of their marketing system, right? I think most people listening, I see this again and again and again, are really operating on rules, right? Like I need to use X number of hashtags. I need to post this number of times. I need to email this, and to be honest, lots of those quote unquote rules have a lot of like, there's a lot of reasons that they're like reasons that those are actually rules and people know them as rules, right? However, until you understand the role those things play inside of your business, they will always keep you on a hamster wheel. They will
Mhm.
always keep you burning yourself out, and they will always keep you not giving yourself enough permission to get creative on how to make your marketing system your own. So something that I've done that I think is a really great first step for people is I've created a short 25-minute video that helps you audit your marketing systems and
Nice.
really understand what is needed, like what your growth systems are and are there holes that you need to fill and gives you ideas on how to fill them, what your nurture systems are and what holes you need to fill, plus ideas on how to fill them, and what your sales systems are and what holes there are and gives you ideas on how to fill them. So my belief is if you have taken care of your growth, your nurturing, and your sales, like that your marketing system needs to be built on top of those three things. But most people are thinking about like one or two of those three, but not all three.
Right.
So if you watch this 25-minute audit, it'll help you identify your holes so that you can clearly take whatever that next step is, or, you know, take the pressure off and stop freaking out about things that maybe doesn't belong inside of your marketing system. So I feel like that would be a good first step for people,
Okay, cool.
especially we're recording this at the end of the year, moving into a new year.
Yeah, and I've done it. I know you shared it out to your email community, so I've
Mhm.
listened to it and I've gone through my marketing systems around it. So it's always been like any of the tools that you send out are amazing. But will you send us the link to that so that we can share it
I will absolutely. Yeah. It'll be, I was telling Brenda at the beginning of this, I'm like, I probably won't remember the link to anything I share. So I'll give you the link so you put in the show notes.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, for sure. But where can people find you just in general, Sophia? Like, where do you tend to hang out the most?
Yes. Okay. Well, you'll definitely find me on Instagram. Speaking of the hiatus, I did just take a hiatus. I'm about to come back this week. So you'll start to see some
Okay.
stuff. My handle is Sophia Parra, Parra is my last name. And I have a podcast called Marketing Unfiltered that Brenda's about to be on as well. So I love my podcast. It's probably my favorite place to connect with people. So that's another great place to keep listening.
Okay, that's awesome. And one last question, and then we're gonna for sure, end the recording. If I was to give you a billboard and you could put anything on it and it'd be anywhere in the world, what would it say and where would you put it?
Oh my God, that's like so putting me on the spot here.
I know. I never tell anybody beforehand because I don't want it to be rehearsed.
You know what? Okay. Anywhere in the world, it would be something my biggest toxic trait is I tend to worry. So on my billboard, it would be something about like worry less or, you know, like yeah, I think something about just reminding me and others who see the billboard to stop worrying and to like just worry less.
Yeah.
And then where would I put it? I mean, to be honest, I would go big and go right in the middle of Times Square and I'd put it right there.
Well, I was gonna say because you're over in England, I would have said like, Piccadilly Circus or something, but that's all good too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for me, because I still identify as a New Yorker.
New Yorker,
And so
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go back with my people and I'm going to tell them to worry less. They need to worry less.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thanks so much, Sophia, for being on here today and sharing all your wisdom with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad I came up with something for that billboard. When you first mentioned that, I was like, oh, geez, I have no idea.
That's all good. It's all good. Thanks so much.